Hi there, thanks for tuning in to my presentation, Beyond Pretty, Weaving Craft and Care into Website Design. I'm Rache. I'm a self-taught website designer and developer. I've built a thriving business offering Squarespace design services. I'm the founder of Squarestylist, and I'm the creator of Standout Squarespace, where I mentor hundreds of today's top Squarespace experts. Allow me to kick off with this question. Is good web design all about just being pixel perfect and pretty? It's easy to think this way. And so, in this era where it's so easy to generate web pages just from a single text prompt, and there are a lot of other platforms promising that we can drag and drop elements anywhere on the canvas and hit publish instantly in seconds. The question is, why do we choose Squarespace? Squarespace is incredibly easy, right? But isn't it a bit too limited? You know, the grid and the style options, the color options are quite restrictive. But I regularly explore other platforms. Staying curious is part of how I serve my clients best. I still constantly find myself returning back to Squarespace for my own business and for most of my clients. Squarespace is still my platform of choice. So today I'll share why I choose Squarespace and why and how its structure and constraints are actually not holding us back. These are actually guardrails that allow us to create websites that are not only visually stunning, but also polished with craft and care. We are at a fascinating crossroads in website design where every week there's a new platform promising unlimited creative control. Place elements anywhere on the canvas. Rotate, however, use unlimited font style on a page, or just prompt your dream website. It would be easy to choose a website platform if we're only after building pretty and fancy websites. But pretty is not necessarily polished. There are several considerations if we choose to truly care for the user experience. If we choose to care, then we constantly ask these questions. How does this layout translate across browsers and device sizes? Will the added elements or features slow down the page? Is this website accessible to users with different abilities? Is this website optimized for search, discoverability, and conversion? How will this website be updated, managed, and scaled? It's easy to publish websites, but it's challenging to create websites that are up to these quality factors: responsiveness, performance, accessibility, SEO, maintenance, and reliability. I use and recommend other platforms where needed, but Squarespace is my favorite. I personally think it has the best technical foundation to create websites that consider these quality factors. Allow me to start with responsiveness. Squarespace uses responsive units such as RAM, AMPs instead of pixels, such that typography and layout scales proportionally with users' browser size and device sizes. You'll find these relative units when you go to site styles, and I hear some frustration that we don't have the option to specify the pixel sizes of our assets and fonts, but this is actually intentional because these responsive units allow us to scale our layouts depending on the device size. If we actually inspect any Squarespace site, that means right-click and click Inspect, we'll find that Squarespace thoughtfully coded its code base. One of the screenshots is here, where you'll find that the font size actually is scaled with the viewport size, and that is the VW that you see in the factor. That means if we are to cater to users who are using large monitors up to 3,000 pixels, that means our layouts can scale up to that size. So I'm thankful that Squarespace is using responsive units. Another aspect in terms of responsiveness is the modern CSS structure or architecture. Since the launch of 7.1 version of Squarespace, they use modern CSS layout methods such as CSS grids and Flexbox. And this is not only in structured sections such as list sections and gallery sections. I was pleasantly surprised when I looked into the Fluid Engine editor and find that they actually are using CSS grids. And that means because they use CSS grids, our layouts can scale and shrink proportionally depending on the device size. Other platforms are able to support drag and drop functionality too, but they are actually highly dependent on what we call absolutely positioning. That's why they have to limit the widths of the website. Now, in terms of performance and SEO, Squarespace use optimal image serving. So that means Squarespace automatically serves responsive images in optimal formats depending on the device. So again, we'll look under the hood. This is how an image block looks like in Squarespace. You look into the source set and notice how the image is actually generated in different formats. What this means is depending on the device size, for example, if the user is just using a browser that's 750 pixels in width, then it will deliver the most optimum format. It won't have to load the highest size, and this will save a lot in terms of loading speed and will help us load our website much faster. Another one is the global font choices. Again, I hear some frustration that Squarespace is a bit limited in terms of assigning fonts, but this is actually intentional because this global font settings not only encourage consistency, but also avoids having to load several fonts that affect page loading speed. Because the more fonts that we load, the slower the page will load. So this is actually Squarespace nudging us to the right direction in terms of performance. Now, let's talk about accessibility. Accessibility is about making sure that users with different abilities can easily navigate our website. And there's a misconception that accessibility is just highly dependent on the user, like how they add alt text, how they assign colors and fonts. But accessibility is actually highly dependent on the code architecture. That means the HTML structure of the website, which is automatically generated by the website platform. I actually have this collaboration with an accessibility expert, and we compared popular website platforms in terms of accessibility. And I'm so glad that Squarespace emerged as one of the top website platforms that considers accessibility. So Squarespace follows semantic HTML standards, and don't be overwhelmed by it. It just means that when we inspect any built-in element like an accordion block in this example, we'll find that there are proper area labels that would signal a screen reader to announce to someone who is visually impaired that they can actually click that button to show more content. And again, these labels are required for accessibility compliance. And we don't have to worry about adding them into the HTML, which most platforms would require, because these are built in thoughtfully into the blocks and components of Squarespace. Another consideration is keyboard navigation support. So there are users with dexterity issues. They aren't able to navigate through their mouse, so they have to depend entirely on their keyboard. So how they navigate the website, especially the links and the buttons, is through the tab key. So when you visit any Squarespace website and try to click the tab key multiple times, you'll find that there will be this focus outline, this rectangle that will allow you to move through the buttons and links. And just by using the keyboard, users are able to easily check out if you have a store or be able to submit a form. This is required for accessibility. But unfortunately, not all platforms have this in mind when they built their platform. If you look into some website, start clicking the tab key, no focus outline will show up. And again, that's an accessibility gap. And I'm really glad that Squarespace makes it easy for us to be compliant. And with regard to this as well, Squarespace is advocating proper color contrast systems through the color themes. If you configure a Squarespace site, we just need to configure the 5 color palettes, and it will easily create the color themes for us. And there's like a magic configuration that will allow us to make sure that there's enough color contrast, especially when we're assigning like accent colors or so. And you'll find that when we change the color theme, for example, to this darker one, then the focus outline will automatically adjust in terms of colors, such that we have enough contrast between the outline and the background. Again, Squarespace automatically handles this for us. Now, in terms of maintenance, again, I've tried a lot of other platforms, and what I find is that for my clients, especially those non-designers and non-tech savvy, the most delightful to manage is Squarespace. In terms of maintainability too, Squarespace is compliant by design. So as a designer, as an expert, I know how to keep up with those quality factors like accessibility and SEO. But then what Squarespace makes it easy is to also allow clients who are not necessarily experts to maintain that compliance. For example, if they need to add a new page and need to add an accordion block, we have peace of mind that that accordion block is already compliant in terms of accessibility. If you experience other platforms, there is an option for us to make their accordion block accessible, but then you'd have to add attributes or change the tags or the HTML. And again, this is not straightforward to edit, especially by clients. So I get this question a lot. What is the best platform for SEO? And what I always say to my clients is that it's the website platform that makes you excited to publish helpful content. And so when my client is not so ready yet to decide on which platform to use, I would ask them to try the different interfaces. Like, okay, this is Squarespace, this is another platform. I would love you for you to try adding content. And then I would ask them which one would make you excited to publish content. That's the best platform for you. And most of the time, the answer is Squarespace. Now, in terms of reliability, in terms of security and updates, I'm so thankful that Squarespace handles all these security and other updates for us. Other platforms would require really regular monitoring to make sure everything is secured and free of bugs. Sometimes it gets frustrating when Squarespace have to force some updates. And again, this is to keep up with the ever-changing technology because browser updates, there are new devices launched almost every month. So we have to keep up with that. And because a website is a dynamic asset, we really need to constantly update it. But the updates are not as frequent as what we need for other platforms. Now, in terms of scalability, this is one of the main reasons I stick with Squarespace, because if you look into the pricing plans of other platforms, they actually have caps in terms of bandwidth, and bandwidth is not only in terms of storage, but it's also based on how much traffic you have on your website. And in my case, I have thousands of visitors per month, and I have a lot of pages. In my calculations, I would be booted to the enterprise plan of other platforms. But in Squarespace, it's a lot more cost efficient for me because they offer generous bandwidth. And when I recommend a website to my clients, I want something that will scale with them. So even if their traffic takes off, they won't have to worry about being booted to higher pricing plans. And so you might be asking, does it mean we're limited with templated designs? I always say that website design is a balancing act. It's possible for us to balance creative vision and quality. So this is my 3-part framework to achieve this, first is maximize built-in features. I choose Squarespace because it has a good framework and foundation, so I just have to maximize those built-in features. And then I just have to preserve the quality structure, because if I preserve those, I know that it will be easy for my clients to edit. I will be compliant with all of those quality standards. So it's best to preserve those. But I just need to push the boundaries a bit by coding with care. I think it's best to demonstrate it with some examples. So for example, if I'd like to create a layout like this, I simply need to add a simple code snippet that will allow me to turn any italicized part of the text into a different font. And it's so easy to implement. I have a video about this. Please check out the page squarestylist.com/beyondpretty, where I summarized all the links I mentioned in this presentation. And then here's another example. Here's a layered list section. This is using the list sections available natively in Squarespace. So that means it would be easy for anyone to manage the content. And so I just use CSS to style it like this, and it's really easy. I provided the codes via squarestylist.com/beyondpretty. And another example is when I like to create tabbed content like this. I call it accessible tabs because there are a lot of code solutions that you might find online, and they will ask you to paste an entire code block into your Squarespace site. But that would mean it would be hard for clients to edit, right? So this one, I created it using the built-in list section. So that means my client won't need to touch any code. They just need to change the title, the description, and the text, or reorder this tab just by using the familiar list section interface. And what's great is it is accessible, meaning that those users who are reliant on keyboards can easily navigate the site just by using the tab key or the keyboard arrows. So these are just examples of how simple customizations can help you achieve your creative vision while maintaining the quality that's already built into Squarespace. I have more examples in the link that I shared, but at this point, I also would like to mention that if we value crafting with care, our clients must also find the value in that. So there are important client conversations and certain touch points of our design process that I'd like to mention. So in my proposals, before we even kick off our project together, I have this managing expectations page. One of them is all about responsiveness. So I mentioned that we follow industry best practices and standards in responsive design and test our designs in key screen sizes. However, it's important to note that due to the vast array of device screen sizes and resolutions available in today's market, it's not possible to guarantee that the layout will look exactly the same across every single device size or screen size. Feel free to adapt this to your needs. And then I also take on projects which are development only. That means the designer will provide the design and I will develop them on Squarespace. I always mention this on my contract and proposal that the designer should agree to collaborate with me, the development team, throughout the project and be open to reasonable design adjustments. I ask for design adjustments should it not make sense in the website design setting. I would like them to know that I am an expert in here. And if there are things that need to be adjusted, then they have to agree that it's a collaboration after all. And I hope this also inspires and empowers you to craft reliable, accessible, and caring website experiences. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in the chat. And again, the resources are available via squarestylist.com/beyondpretty. And I'm happy to connect with you via socials at squarestylist.